Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Drive Pink Dialogue. It's episode number 31, and tonight we are going to be talking about Inter Miami's 3-2 comeback victory against CF Montreal. As always, I'm your host, Scotty. I'm here with my co-host, Saur. How you feeling tonight, man?
Sorry, I'm just trying to fix my lighting, so there's a little bit of an issue here. But there you go. We won the game. 5 wins on the trot. A lot to be happy about, but the manner of the victory wasn't really convincing, and it's left me with a few curious emotions, and I'm confused. But a win's a win, so I'm glad we were able to get that 3 points and march on because we're looking up and up and up.
Yeah. Listen, we've just won 5 games in a row in the MLS for the first time ever in our history. We just won 3 back-to-back road games. Again, a first in Miami history. So, I mean, there was a time where going on the road and getting a win like that against Montreal would have been a phenomenal result and the best one we got all month, right? So to see that happen and us be like, it just shows me like how good the vibes are, how excellent everything is right now in terms of where Inter Miami's at. So I think it's just all smiles right now.
Yeah, but it's also the expectations that we have from this team, because we know that this team can go and beat opposition in the MLS. So to have that level of confidence in your team is really, really refreshing. And you just know that even with 2-0 down, it didn't seem all dire straits, did it? I genuinely thought we were going to get back into it. All it needed was the first goal from our side. And that's exactly what happened. We've gotten into a bit of a habit of conceding goals first, and I'm sure we're going to talk about it. I'm only worried about when some of our big hitters leave for international duty, because if those habits continue to persist, that might show up at the time. But that's for a future Inter Miami fan to worry about, right? As of now, we're doing really well, and everyone seems to be enjoying the Inter Miami and Messi party.
Yeah, there's the happiness of today us and the concerns of future us. But fortunately, future us isn't involved in this podcast. So mostly it's just happiness, right? Anything that you want to talk about before we get into this game specifically? Anything going on? I know we heard Jordi Alba is going to be, coming back soon. We are expecting Ian Frey to be back at some point soon. And Diego Gomez, Federico Redondo, they're sort of on track to come back in the next month or so. Other than that, anything that you wanted to touch on?
No, man, I think there's a lot to discuss in terms of the tactics, in terms of what happened in that first half and why things happen. And we've got a long show ahead of us, so let's get right into it.
Okay, well, let's start with the pregame lineup. We spent an hour dissecting it, and I think we did a pretty good job. It's a midfield that we didn't love, but we were really excited about the front 3. We had to replace Aviles with Kristoff, and that might have been a talking point, we thought, and it ended up being a talking point, and we'll get to that. But now that you've had an opportunity to watch the game and see how everything played out, how are you feeling about this 11? I asked you in the pregame show, is this the best 11 that Inter Miami could put out right now? And then we got to see it live and in action, and, well, what do you think?
I don't like it. I don't like it at all. This was not what I expected. We have the formation wrong, because I have no idea what Tata Martino was doing in terms of that setup in that first half. It was a little bit all over the place, and we're going to talk about it. It was not a 4-3-3 to begin with. We were playing a bit of a 4-4-2/3-5-2. It was a weird formation. Anyways, that aside, we had 2 concerns from this. I highlighted Kristoff in that circle the lineup game. You highlighted Kremaski and Gressel, or the midfield, right?
Kremaski. My 2 things were Kremaski and Rojas, who I thought if they didn't come to play, we might have a problem. But fortunately, they came to play and we were fine.
But I will say this, in the setup that was to start with, Kremaski and Rojas were a little bit, I don't want to say all over each other, but there was just a lot of confusion into how this team wanted to play in that first 20-25 minutes with that setup that we had. So we had 2 concerns, Kristoff, you had Kremaski, Rojas, And then obviously the midfield combination, 2 out of 3 of those concerns came to fruition. I was very, very upset with the way this midfield performed, especially in those first 30, 35 minutes. And we really needed to kick up the backside to be able to get back into this game. I'm not blaming the players by any means. I think tactically we weren't set up in the best manner, but I don't want to see this particular formation or this setup with these particular set of players on the team sheet again, because that's going to definitely put me in a whole load of concern.
Okay, well, let's get straight into it. Inter Miami, unlike the last few games, was able to really dominate possession in the opening minutes. They did a good job of poking and prodding without being risky or, turning the ball over. And I know Julian Gressel got a marginally decent opportunity early. But it felt like they had a game plan in this game to come in and just dominate possession in a way that we haven't seen over the last couple of games, and maybe that was a response to giving up all of these goals in the first 5 minutes. And it did seemingly work until both teams sort of settled in. The first big moment, I think, was the Bryce Duke goal in the 22nd minute. They hit us on the counter. Bryce Duke gets forward. Jules Anthony Vilsaint gets a nice pass forward to Bryce Duke, who's beyond the defense, and he gets a one-on-one with Drake Callender and slots in the 5-hole between his legs and puts Montreal up 1-0. Let's talk about it.
I agree with you. I think the first 20 minutes were decent, especially offensively. And there seemed to be a lot of emphasis on trying to attack quickly and string a few passes and try and get that first goal. We did well with the formation that we had. I think Gressel was playing further wide than we would expect a midfielder to. And then there are definitely opportunities in behind that Montreal defense. The problem was our transition. Defensive transition was really, really bad for us because we were so far up in terms of the attacking that we were doing that we were wide open. And that's when the goal came from. Wilson, obviously, on the right-hand side of the pitch, puts in a really good ball for Duke, who had all the space to run in behind. And good finish. I don't want to blame Callender too much. Maybe he could have done a little bit better. But it just felt like we had set ourselves up for a little bit of a jeopardy if we were unable to get a goal in the first 10 minutes and we got caught in the transition. That's what happened.
Yeah. I was really frustrated, actually, with how attacking we were. On that play, we had 9 guys in the final third. We had Frede was sitting back, and obviously Drake Callender was, in his own half. But the other 9 players, including Franco Negri, were all in the final third. And that's just asking to be countered on. And it wasn't a particularly bad turnover. It was just like, you are too far forward for what they're trying to do, which is have athletic players and hit you on the counter. And you fell right into their trap, and it worked exactly how Montreal drew it up. Kristoff got way too high, but Cello Wiegand also very high, Busquets high in that moment. It was just a lack of discipline from a team that was trying to put players in good positions, and yet a lot of those players aren't goal scorers anyways, and so there's no need for them to be up there. And also, all they were doing was congesting it and making it more difficult for everyone that was up there to do anything positive with the ball anyways. So I was really frustrated with that. I think the whole team's going to go back, look at the film, and be like, there's going to be 3 or 4 players that are going to be like, how did I end up in that position? That was really tough. As far as Callender, listen, any professional player, especially an attacking player, which Bryce Duke is a 10, right? If you get a one-on-one with the keeper, it's really hard to blame the keeper for not saving anything. And so, yes, it went between his legs, and yes, he was really frustrated. He thought he should have saved it, but let's be honest, he's trying to guard the entire net in a one-on-one. It's really tough to do. So I'm not really going to blame Drake Callender for that.
And he had a few good saves later on in the game. So I think he sort of redeemed himself. But yeah, I completely agree with you. I think this tactic would have worked really well if we had scored a couple of early goals in the first 10 minutes. And then we could have been like, oh yeah, this attacking, fast flowing, high up the pitch tactic is definitely suiting us. But I think credit to Montreal for sustaining the pressure. I thought you said in the pregame show that they were going to come out being a little bit more defensive in a low block and hit us in the counter. I said that they're going to be a lot more adventurous going forward and try to get us with the high press early on. I thought it was a bit of a mixture of both of our analysis, because they weren't necessarily sitting too far back, but they were definitely hoping to get us on the counter, and they weren't afraid to venture forward when needed. And I think they were the smarter of the two teams in that sense.
Yeah, but they were better when they were sitting back and hitting us on the
Yeah.
counter. I think maybe we just gave too much credit to their coaching staff, although I do like Laurent Courtois. But yeah, that's when they were at their best, and that's when they got their 2 goals. They get a second goal about 10 minutes later in the 32nd minute. This is Jules Anthony Vilsaint, just a bad recovery from a couple players, and not really in transition, but your defense isn't set. And a nice goal by Vilsaint, a nice shot, nothing Calendar could have done. He got himself into a dangerous position with the ball and had a nice finish.
Yeah, and I think it was Alvarez who had a good hustle to keep the ball in. And again, from the right side is where they attacked for this goal as well. So we're going to get into it. We're going to get into the tactical setup. But I think at that point, Negri and Wigan were playing too far up the pitch to be able to defend on that side and be more compact. And that's where Kristoff and Wigan had a bit of a misunderstanding. It was just all over the place for us. Too many gaps that Montreal was able to exploit quite quickly with their counter-attacking.
Yeah, and that goal, you were expecting Julian Gressel to be the cover man for Vilsaint, and he just isn't that player. Like, you can't ask him to do that and be responsible for him and expect good things to happen. So that was just an unfortunate situation where your lineup got beaten by the other team and they got a mismatch. Jumping forward to the 44th minute, Leo Messi gets fouled and is injured, at least needs treatment, and he has to come off for a minute. I'm going to stop here before we move forward to the more exciting part of the game, because I know you wanted to talk about this. He gets hurt. He has to get treatment, and because of the new MLS time-wasting rules, he has to sit out for a minute. And so that's what ends up giving Matías Rojas the free kick instead of Leo Messi. But what are your thoughts on that rule? This is the first time it's seemingly affected Inter Miami.
There are 2 rules. That's one of them. And that's the first time that we saw it in action. 2 minutes is a really long time on a football pitch. You can score 2 goals in 2 minutes, or practically more technically. That's a long time for one of your best players to be out from the game. I think they really need to rethink that rule, because it doesn't make sense for me. Imagine playing for 10 men without 2 minutes, and it will eventually cost teams. It will 100% cost teams. So they need to either scrap the rule altogether for my liking, or just reduce the time, because 2 minutes is a very, very long time. And then they've got another daft rule, which has to do with the substitutions. And we experienced that as well with Campana having to sit out.
Let's do one thing at a time.
Which is another one of the rules that I was really mad about, but we'll talk about that one too.
Regarding the first rule where Messi has to sit out for 2 minutes, he's on the sideline. I think humans are just naturally opposed to change. And that's why I think a lot of purists aren't going to like it. I think it's an amazing rule. I don't agree with you at all. And that's okay. Like, everyone can have their own opinion. But my personal opinion is I love the rule. I really think it's going to be effective. And I think you're complaining about nothing. Going down to 10 men is tough. And being without a player for 2 minutes is not that bad. If you're down a guy, all you have to do is survive for 2 minutes. It's not like in the middle of a game where, yes, a team can score multiple goals in 2 minutes, but not against a team that's in a low block that knows they have to just kill 2 minutes of the game in order to see out this break, and especially an attacking player. There are potentially some little nuances to the rule that can make it better, like maybe it's only in the second half. Because again, the point is to prevent time wasting. Maybe it doesn't affect teams that are losing the game, right? Maybe. But I think that the overall benefit it so far outweighs the cost that I don't agree. And
Yeah, I'm not a big fan. For me, I think 2 minutes is a really long time. Cut it down to 30 seconds or a minute, but 2 minutes is very long on a football pitch. That's added time. So, like that 2 minutes could be added time in the first half, and you can easily score on that. So, I want rules that don't necessarily disturb the flow of the game as much. And I guess it's just a matter of preference. Maybe my position in this changes as we see more of it in action. And yeah, if it cuts down time wasting by a ton, that's great. But I do think teams might actually suffer from this more than we're giving credit for. But maybe I'm being too cynical.
yeah, the other thing I'll say is this isn't a rule you're going to notice the benefits from, really, because players have already adjusted. But if you do the studies like MLS did when they tested this last year, it actually makes a big difference in terms of time wasting. And I'd much rather see anything that cuts down on time wasting up as opposed to just, potentially losing a player, once every 15 games for 2 minutes, right? This is the first time this has affected us. And it's been, I guess, maybe 10 games since this rule came into effect once the referee lockout ended. And again, like we scored a goal with a man down. So I think that there's a little bit of overreaction to this. But listen, everyone's allowed to have their own opinion, and that's just mine.
I hate it.
Which leads us to something that I know you loved about 30 seconds later, because while Lionel Messi was on the sideline, that allowed Matías Rojas to step up to a free kick from, I don't know, 38 yards away, something ridiculous. And he nailed it, man. It was awesome.
Goal of the month, easily. I had a bit of a so to put it in context, they conceded 2 goals. I was distracted and I was doing my cooking and stuff, and I had my iPad on the side, and I saw there was a free kick, and my first reaction was, "Damn, Messi's not on it." And then I saw Rojas line up for that, and I wanted to see what it was. If I'd recorded my reaction to that, I was stunned. It was beautiful, absolutely stunning goal, and he's got a left foot and a half on him.
I looked at my girlfriend right as he was stepping up to it, and I kind of sighed, and I was like, he's going to shoot this, isn't he? Because I was just thinking this is just a waste of an opportunity. It's too far, and I just knew he was going to shoot it because he's a shooter, right? He's got a great left foot, and then he hit it, and I couldn't believe it because I was just frustrated that he was going to take the shot, and yet he makes it. It's huge for Inter Miami because they, I was ready to tear into them at halftime because they had a really poor first half, at least by their standards. And this sort of changed everything from a momentum and confidence perspective. All of a sudden, you feel like, oh, we're down 2-1 going into halftime. We're going to be fine, especially once we get a few things, cleaned up tactics-wise. But maybe I didn't do justice to the goal because it's the best goal we've had in, I don't know, maybe not that long just because of some of the goals that we've had recently. But it was phenomenal, definitely.
It was a long way out. So for him to even have the guts to shoot from there just goes to show the confidence of that man. We're going to see a few of those this season, I think. It's not the last of them. He's already proven he can score one in the last couple of games ago, and this was another absolute banger.
He normally when you see a goal from that distance, you think, at least I think the goalkeeper probably could have done better. But you watch him, he doesn't play it wrong. He just starts on the other side because he has the wall on that side. And then the ball dips, but it doesn't dip in a way that he can dive for it. It's, he does dive for it, and I think he covers it distance wise, but it just goes over it, and it's just perfectly placed. Unbelievable shot. Definitely the goal of the weekend for my money.
Yep. And I think that changed the flow of the game. So that's even more important in that sense.
I agree. And then 4 minutes later, in extra time of the first half, Inter Miami gets a corner, and Luis Suarez, after a touch from, I believe, Bryce Duke, gets his foot to the ball and ties it up before halftime. And all of a sudden, it's back to even, and the game is Inter Miami's to lose at this point.
Yep. Another set piece goal. Not many that we've seen Inter Miami score. Luis Suarez, man, how does he do it? He's always there, available in the right place at the right time, and just knocks it in. Wasn't his best performance today, but he still got on the score sheet. And I'm pretty sure he's in line to be MVP still, right? Or is it Messi?
Well, I think Messi's the favorite right now, but we'll see what the numbers look like when Messi comes back from Copa America.
Yeah, like it was, yeah. Can't say more about it. But the one thing I will say is it was a shame that we weren't able to score in open play. Both our goals came from set pieces, which is great in hindsight because we have that set piece danger as well now. We're quite a threat in the set pieces now with Rojas, with Messi, and we know a couple of our players can head it in. But open play wise, the first half wasn't the best of performances. I was just really, really happy that we were able to go into that half equalized.
I was a little nervous, actually. I was worried that because I didn't think we had a good half, and I was
Not at
worried that
all.
Tata and the team would go. They would take that 5 minute, period at the end where we equalize and say, you know what, we're fine. We don't have to change anything. Just run it back out there. And we didn't make any subs at halftime, and so I was a little nervous that they were going to come into the second half and just kind of hit replay, which isn't really what happened. And again, we'll talk about tactics in a little bit, but they really simplified things from my perspective, and it led to good things. Inter Miami gets the go-ahead goal in the 59th minute. Leo Messi to Matías Rojas in transition. Rojas with a tremendous pass into open space, perfectly placed, a great weight on the ball. Kramaski corrals it and then fights off a defender to toe poke it past the keeper and give us a 3-2 lead. And that was the 3-2 lead that then we ended up taking to the final whistle.
You called it, man. You had the right prediction. 3-2 is exactly what you called. And although you did say that it's going to be a lot easier than the scoreline suggests, I don't think it was as easy. But that second goal was, again, Matías Rojas, man. He's showing his creativity. And I was really concerned with his numbers for Corinthians and the team that he played for earlier because his output wasn't that fantastic. And we discussed an entire episode about him and what his potential expectations should be. He surpassed them thus far because that ball was really, really good. Out from the outside of his left foot, I believe, perfectly weighted. When I first saw Benjamin Kramaski get on it, I thought he had a really bad touch and I thought the opportunity was gone. But kudos to him to keep struggling and hustling for that and eventually get that toe poke in. I think it was Wilson who was tracking him back. Could have done slightly better. But yeah, good to go up 3-2. And I'm glad that we were able to sustain the lead throughout because that was early in the half as well. We scored in the 58th minute, I believe.
59th.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Anything else? Any other moments in the game that really stood out to you? I guess we can talk about the 10-second sub rule at the end. For those that weren't following live, Luis Suarez comes out at about the 89th minute, and he takes too long to get off the field. And so Campana isn't allowed onto the field for what is supposed to be 1 minute. It ended up being like 3 minutes, which is a problem. But yeah, I don't know. Go ahead. I'm assuming you have the same thoughts as the last one.
You already know my thoughts. Why change the game, man? I hate VAR. Of course, it's good for the game in certain ways, but I hate it. Call me a Luddite, call me old and traditional, but I don't like anything that disrupts the flow of the game. This, I think, is a good rule in trying to get the time wasting out, 100%. But I just feel you can punish teams in other ways.
Well, I definitely think that they didn't apply it right. Campana was off for like 3 minutes.
Yeah, that's a
longer
long
than,
time.
or 2 minutes longer than he should have been. And in that moment of the game, it's different than you have to make sure you're not over punishing at that point in the game. So I think I would have been okay with it if he was gone for an extra 60 seconds, but it ended up being like 3 minutes, and it's you got to be on top of it if you're going to do that type of rule change for sure. Anything about Montreal before we get into Inter Miami's tactical setup? Any players that really stood out to you? I really thought Vilsain had a good game. He's only 21, so he's a player that's just going to keep getting better and better. I don't know if he has a European future or if he's a guy that's going to be with Montreal for a long time, but he's a homegrown for them. And if I was a Montreal fan, that would be a very exciting prospect and a guy that I would love to see doing well. And he definitely did well on a big stage last night.
Yeah, I think at least in the first half, Vilcent, Lassiter as well, and then Bryce Duke, that trio, hurt us in a lot of ways because they took their chances really well. They caught us in transition, and this was a Montreal team that we knew had a little bit of athleticism, that we knew had a little bit of pace on them, and they were able to get in behind. So I was really confused as to why Tata went with the setup that he did, but yeah, it was a good game from them. But what does it say that they weren't able to beat us even when Lionel Messi wasn't um, at his best or didn't have too many goal contributions? So I think this team was definitely beatable, which we showed, but they made a good game out of it. It was competitive. The first half flew by. So overall, a much better game than the first one that we had against them at home.
Yeah, I thought Courtois was very aggressive with his substitutes as well. I thought Yankov and Sanusi both had a positive impact off the bench, and I think he turned the game into a situation in the last 20 minutes where they were creating chances to potentially equalize. And so I thought they showed more fight and more of an aggressive confidence than other teams have once Inter Miami does get that lead. And so I do want to commend them for that. I don't think they're a team with a ton of individual talent, but I do think they're making the most of it. And so, yeah.
I will say this. They sort of got done in by that fantastic Matías Rojas goal because the game could have been completely different if they'd gone into the half 2-0 and they'd have something to defend in that second half. So the fact that the momentum changed of a set piece when Inter Miami wasn't necessarily looking as threatening. I like to see the stats of how many opportunities we had before that goal because it didn't seem like we had too many clear-cut chances. So they got done in by individual brilliance, and that wasn't, they must be gutted about that. But overall, I think we had enough in the tank to be able to beat them.
Yeah. Is that the last time we see them this year? You think they have a chance of making the playoffs?
Yeah. You never know. It depends on their acquisitions in the summer, and I think it's a team that will eventually get better, and maybe next season they have a little bit more to their play. But this season, I don't think it's going to be as close. If we do see them again, I hope we win because this is a team we can definitely beat.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, let's get into the tactics. There was a Tata Martino quote that came out after the game where he mentioned that he didn't need to change things, that he shouldn't have changed things with a team that was really on a winning streak. He didn't really explain that if he meant the tactics or the subs, but it was certainly interesting in the first half. I didn't love it. I don't know. I want to hear your thoughts. We're going to try something new tonight where we're going to get a screenshot to try and help us. So for anyone listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or anything like that, I apologize for not having the visual, but we'll do our best to explain it. And with that said, take it away, Saur.
Yeah, it was a bit of a weird one because I watched the game first. We saw obviously the lineup was a 4-3-3 according to us, but that's not how we set up. We had the same personnel, but we had a different setup. I thought it was a 4-4-2 when I first saw it. And then at some points, it seemed like a 3-5-2 again. So it was really weird. And I think it was really fluid. And that was the nature of the construct that this team was by Tata. So here, if you see, it's Sergio Busquets who's on the ball. And he's basically in line with our defensive setup. He's in line with Freire and Kristoff, who are next to him. And then we've got Matías Rojas, who's technically on the team sheet as a number 7, sitting right next to the center circle. Gressel, who's playing as a right wing, who would traditionally be a more central midfielder in this setup. And then we've got Negri, who's far up top, playing as a left wing. And then we have Benjamin Kramaski, who's floating in the middle. So already you can see there are two things that we pointed out that need to be different for us to actually have an impact in this game. Sergio Busquets playing higher up as an 8, because that's where he's the most effective. And this is the complete opposite because he's essentially sitting with the defensive line. And then we also said that Inter Miami looks a lot better when their fullbacks are playing a lot more defensive. I think even in the second half, at least Negri was basically playing as a left winger. And we saw Wigan really high up. We saw Negri really high up, which created a lot of spaces in between that back four. And that's the reason, I think, according to me, that we weren't able to deal with Montreal's offensive transitions. I think the instructions to individual players were incorrect. And I think Tata obviously acknowledged that. Gressel pushing up in the right wing spot, that's fine. He plays right wing really well. I think he can put in a really good ball, but he's not able to track back and he's not able to do his defensive duties. So when you have someone like Marcelo Wigan who's pushing up forward as well, you want your winger to be able to come back and support in defense in case your fullback's caught out of position. That wasn't happening. That was leaving a lot of space on that right side, and we conceded 2 goals off of it. This setup was basically done to ensure that we're attacking and we're able to score fast and furiously. And after the 20th minute, it didn't work because we started conceding a lot of offensive transitions from Montreal, and we didn't have the legs to stop that. When everyone is so far up, it becomes really difficult. So I think for me, you can already see a lot of these gaps in this picture. And yeah, that for me was the most stark picturization of why we struggled in that first half.
Yeah. Sergio Busquets, I mean, obviously Lionel Messi is the best at this, but Sergio Busquets, as far as our midfielders, is the best with the ball in tight spaces. And he's the best ball progressor of all of our midfielders. And so you want him in places where his ball progressions are dangerous and his ability to play in tight spaces are dangerous. And that is at the edge of the final third. And instead you have him back playing in the center back line, and you kind of lose that because A, they weren't pressing all that much. And so you didn't need his ability to be good in tight spaces. And B, he's not close enough to the action to actually put dangerous balls through. I hate this. I hate it when he does this. And I get that he is the 6 and he is the deep line playmaker, and that's sort of a traditional role. But to me, it makes so much more sense to leave your fullbacks back there, be defensively solid and stout, keep a clean sheet or keep 1 goal, and then throw Busquets way higher up the pitch where he can be much more dangerous connecting and creating with Messi and Suarez and Kramaski and whatever. But that type of setup requires a defensive midfielder that's an actual defensive midfielder, and this midfield doesn't have that. And I hate the way he sets up his midfield. And listen, we talked about it every single episode, but this midfield just doesn't work in a way that's dominating either offensively or defensively. And to me, it's because Gressel and Busquets can't play together. But again, you just want Busquets higher up the pitch. And so if you have Gressel, he's going to go up there and Busquets just naturally sits back. I hate it. I hate it. I hate it. In this game particularly, he also got the fullbacks way higher. Listen, Cello is not a amazing player in the final third, and neither is Franco Negri. And so when you have Jordi Alba, it's more understandable to give him the freedom and creative license to just bomb forward and create offensive opportunities. But with these two, and one of the reasons we've been, I thought, more defensively sound over the last couple of weeks is because they were sitting back and just guarding against defensive transitions and making sure that the only way the opposition can beat you is how you defend them so that you don't let it happen, which is exactly what happened in this game, where we knew exactly how they were going to beat us. We talked about it in the pregame, and yet we didn't defend what they were trying to do.
So 3 points to what you just said, right? Sergio Busquets being a deep line playmaker 6. Yeah, at Barcelona, he was definitely that lone 6, that singular deep line, CDM of sorts. I don't think that's him anymore. That's not his game.
And at Barcelona, you have every single player is a creative player. You don't need his creativity up the pitch like you do for this Inter Miami team.
And he doesn't have the legs to play a defensive midfield role in the MLS. He just doesn't. So he's only more effective. And this is not a knock to Sergio Busquets. It's just, age obviously catches up with you and you need to utilize his talents as best as you can. So when you put him as the sole defensive line midfielder with nobody to support him behind him, it's basically playing with one hand tied behind your back, or 2 legs basically tied together. Secondly, Negri and Cello aren't playing as fullbacks; they're playing as wingbacks here because there's nobody for Negri to actually overrun in behind. There's nobody to overlap. Matías Rojas is playing in the middle of the park. He's playing as a midfielder here. So it's not even, you can't knock Gresso here because he's playing as a right wing. It's the midfield setup. So what I'm trying to convey with this is it's not the players who are playing bad or giving the ball away. This is a tactical mistake. This is tactically set up to be wrong and it just doesn't work. You use this when you're down 3-0 in the 80th minute and you really need to get a goal back. You don't use this when you have enough firepower to be able to score as many goals as you want when you just leave your defense absolutely naked and behind. Doesn't make sense.
You know what this is for? This is for if you are playing Monterrey on the road and you need to score 2 goals in the second half.
Thank you.
This isn't for a game against Montreal. Okay, let's go to the second half. We have another picture from the second half. Talk to me about what Tata Martino changed that made it a lot, easier to see out the game.
So again, I picked this picture up because it's a perfect representation of what worked in that second half. Sergio Busquets is in front of both Gresso and Benjamin Kremaski. Yes, we're playing higher up. Yes, we have a high line. Our defense is on the center circle here, but Sergio Busquets has cover in behind him. So in case someone like a Vilcent or Bryce Duke try to get in behind, we have Benjamin Kremaski covering that run. He's able to track his runners. Matías Rojas is playing a lot more far wide. He's still not holding the width as much as I would have liked him to, as much as Robert Taylor would when he comes on. And we saw he got into really good goal scoring opportunities once he came on. So for me, that's still a little bit of a iffy positional play. But overall, you can see that this is a lot more traditional 4-3-3 with your fullbacks playing slightly back, where you can see Negri and Wiegand both being a little bit further back instead of overlapping in behind. And then your wingers are stretching the field out, even though that's not happening in this particular picture. I think we reverted back to a more traditional 4-3-3. And that helped us so much more because we were more stable. There was a lot more defensive cover, which allowed our offense to be able to, be adventurous. And in case you lose the ball, there's enough players behind the ball who will be able to turn it over and bring it back up. So this game was a game of two halves, and that was the tactical mistake that Tata made. And I wanted to really talk about this because it shows that you have to set this team up properly to be able to get the best out of it, despite the fact that we've got so many superstars in this team. And B, Tata Martino actually recognized this, and I'm glad that he was able to make the changes. So points to him for doing that. But yeah, I think this was a game where we had two completely different tactical setups in the first and the second half, and it warranted a discussion.
All right, guys, that was the graphics. We just tried it for the first time. Let us know if you thought it was helpful or not. We're just trying to see if it can be helpful or not. Yeah, I think the thing about Tata Martino is he has to just keep it simple. Be sound with your defenders and put them in positions to provide sound defense. Let your midfielders be midfielders and don't try and make them creative outlets or your third center. Like, let them be midfielders. And then you have the best offense in the league, not just with Lionel Messi, not just with Luis Suarez, not just with Robert Taylor, but now with Matías Rojas also. There should be no reason to make it overly complicated to try and produce goals. Really, all you need to do is ensure that you have a sound, solid system that makes sense, and you'll be fine because Lionel Messi will break through or Luis Suarez will break through, and you will get the goals. And you only make it harder on yourself if you leave open opportunities for the other team to hit you where you left those holes in your tactics. And so I hate it. Leave your fullbacks deeper, especially when you don't have Jordi Alba, because Franco Negri is a good player, but he doesn't have that game-changing offensive output that lets you go, okay, fine, Jordi, go for it. You do what you got to do. And then Cello, leave him back there because both of their goals, especially the first one, was just a matter of everyone playing too far forward, especially the fullbacks, especially the midfield. And there was just no structural cover. It just didn't make any sense. Okay. In the second half, it didn't feel like, even though we did score, it didn't feel like Inter Miami was ever going for the kill. In the 79th minute, we had the substitutes where we brought on Yannick Bright and took off Julian Gressel. Same time, Kristoff got injured, and so we put on Ryan Saylor in that second substitution window. That was to me saying, okay, we got to kill this game. Let's see it out. And I think that makes sense, and we can talk about that later. But for the first 35 minutes of that second half, it didn't feel like Inter Miami was really, really going for it and creating all-out chances. They got one in transition, which is a little unique. But, Lionel Messi was trying to do a few things, and it wasn't coming off in this game like it normally does. But it just didn't feel like there was ever a real urgency to get goal number 3, and definitely no urgency to get goal number 4, even after you get goal number 3. I don't know. Did you see it that way? Or
I did see it that way. I don't think we had too many clear-cut chances where we were like, oh, this team is really on top now and we're going to definitely get a few goals. Because what this Inter Miami team does is it scores goals in bunches. Once the first goal comes, it just starts snowballing from there. It happened similarly in this game. We got the first and the second goal in fairly quick succession, and then the third quickly after the second half started. But it just didn't seem like we were clicking completely 100% this game. Messi didn't have his best game, obviously, and that by no means is a knock on Messi as a player. I think he's set such high standards, and his last few games have been absolutely phenomenal. So when he has a nice, decent game, it feels like he didn't contribute much, which is completely false. But it just felt like we were trying a few things, but it just didn't happen entirely. And I agree with Tata. Just once you're 3-2 up, use that to defend a little bit and be a little bit more solid in the back end. I love that Yannick Bright substitution every single time it happens, and I'm going to harp on about it every single time it happens. For me, Yannick Bright has a brilliant place on this team, and that's as a substitute off the bench in the 60th or the 70th minute to try and kill the game and prevent any offensive opportunities.
Yeah. Should we talk about the transition defense? I mean, it feels like we talked about the solution just now, but it's continuously a problem. It's going to always be a problem. And I understand that fans will look at other leagues, the Premier League, La Liga, whatever, and you see these tremendous center backs that are phenomenal one-on-one defenders, but that just doesn't exist in this league. It's not going to exist in this league. There's maybe 3 to 5 defenders in the entire league that can really be solid one-on-one defenders in transition like that and have the athleticism and discipline and all those things. And almost all of them are going to be in Europe in 2 years. And so they're not going to be coming to Inter Miami. So wishing for better center backs is not really the solution to your transition problems. It has to be structural. And yet here we are, got beat in transition twice. At least the first one was a pure transition opportunity. It doesn't feel like it's hurt this team over the last couple of weeks, but it also doesn't feel like we've played a team that is going to really punish us for that, right? FC Cincinnati, a lot better than what we've played so far. The Columbus Crew are going to pass right through us if we're not disciplined defensively. So listen, we've opened up a nice little lead on them in the table, but that head-to-head game is going to be really interesting to see if our defense can hold up. And spoiler alert, we won't have Lionel Messi either. So tough times, but what can we do to fix it?
I don't think we saw that in the last few games. The defensive transition issue that we faced in the first few games had sort of been corrected by the 4-3-3 and the way that this team was setting up. I have no idea why Tata Martino decided to go for a Hail Mary today and just set us up for failure again, because it sort of felt like we were turning a corner with that and we were getting better at it. Yes, it wasn't 100% there. There were some issues here and there where we would get caught in transition. But when you're an attacking team that goes so far up and relies on being a ball-playing team, you will turn the ball over sometimes and you will have those opportunities. But it didn't feel as bad as it did yesterday when they basically had they cut through us like butter at one point, and that wasn't fun to watch. So for me, it was the tactical setup that allowed for that to happen, and I think that can definitely be mitigated if you have the right tactical setup. Plus, if we get Redondo back.
Maybe the elephant in the room that we haven't mentioned yet is we did have Avila suspended because of yellow card accumulation, and in his place was Sergio Kristoff. Before we talk about him and how he paired with Nico Frede and more specifically Marcelo Wiegand, I do want to say he's missed a lot of games. He was actually out for quite a long period of time. I believe he missed 8 or 9 games, something like that. His last game was the first New York Red Bulls game at the end of March. So it's been a while. So long, in fact, that the first minute of yesterday's game was the first minute that he's played with Marcelo Wiegand on the roster. The last time he was healthy was before Cello joined the team. So keeping that in mind, it probably shouldn't surprise us as much as it did that he and Kristoff and Cello didn't have great connection or great chemistry, and they got beat for it. Not just for that first goal, but there was a couple times in that first half where they weren't on the same page and they created a problem for Inter Miami.
And that was compounded by the fact that Cello was asked to play so far up.
Yeah.
So again, why would you do that to your own team? It just feels like you're handicapping them from the first minute to go. I think Kristoff had a much better second half. He defended a lot better in the second half when we were 4-3-3 with our fullbacks not bombing down the pitch, or at least Cello not bombing down the pitch. He definitely needed that cover on the right side, because you can't have 2 players running at you of the athleticism and quality of Vincent and Bryce Duke and stop both of them. You just can't. Even if you're a 20-year-old fully fit centre back. So I don't blame Kristoff. It's his first game back, and he obviously went down injured as well. I'm not sure how bad that is, but he gave it his all, man. He tried to give it his all, and unfortunately, it wasn't his best night out. But I thought he was better in the second half.
Yeah, and I think the asterisk of saying this was his first game back in a while and his first minutes with a new right back are important context for his performance, because it wasn't great, but I don't think he was set up in a good situation. And going back to the tactics, I think if you're bringing in a center back like that and he's quality on the ball, but he's not that athletic in transition, and maybe you do need to protect him a little bit, especially out of the gate, to see what he's got. Maybe you can adjust after 30 minutes and he feels comfortable, but out of the gate, you got to protect him a little bit. And we just didn't do that, and we got beat for it. And so, yeah, it's just frustrating because it's the same problems often. It happens a lot. It was the same thing last week against the Red Bulls. We did the same exact thing, a little difference in the nuance, and then we changed it at halftime and we blew them out. And so, yeah. Anything else about the game? Maybe we should talk about the DNA of this team. We've gone down almost every single game. This is a stat for you. We've played 13 MLS games now. In 10 of them, we've conceded the first goal. And in the other 3, 2 of them were clean sheets. So in 10 of the 11 games where we've conceded first. And yet, I think we have a tremendous record, 6-2-2 in those 10 games. What is it about this team and the DNA of these players that says, yeah, you score first, finally we can wake up?
It's a sign of the best teams in the world, right? They just find a way to win. So that's what it is. It's really worrying that we have to go behind so much in all of the games to be able to even get started and get started playing. But we've got so many players in the pitch who can actually have a difference. As AZ Rebellion said, we have so many impact players. Imagine if this team was set up in the first half the way we change our tactics. If we hadn't conceded this many goals, our goal difference would be wild. We are actually conceding a lot of goals. For any other team, whether it's the Premier League, whether it's the La Liga or the MLS, we should be thankful that we have Messi, because we wouldn't be able to sustain this in the long term. I still think this is going to be the way forward. We're going to struggle in the first half, we're going to figure out how to play against teams, and then eventually go on to win. That's just how this team has been set up to respond to situations. I think we need that impetus to be able to get out, get out of the blocks. We are very slow, especially away from home. And in games that we try to play progressively and proactively in the first half, we're not set up tactically well. So it seems like a bit of a compound effect from everywhere. But it's fantastic to have a team that's able to come from behind, because 2-0 and still go on to win 3-2 it's always brilliant, isn't it?
We've given up 8 goals in this 5-game winning streak, 2 against Sporting, 1 against Nashville, 1 against the Revs, and then 2 each of the last week. Probably closer to 7 because that penalty in the 97th minute last week is,
Stupid.
Not really part of the run of play. But and so the stats haven't been bad. And in fact, I think for large portions we felt good about our defense, but it's just the slow starts. And in this game, this game was a little different. I think in this game we saw a true structural deficiency, a true.
I don't think we started slow.
I agree. So listen, we've also scored 19 goals in those 5 games. And so when you're averaging close to 4 goals a game, everything becomes a lot easier, and it's hard to really complain. And all of these are champagne problems, and we're, spoiled. But still, it'd be nice to see what the problems are and improve on them, right? So that's why we talk about it. It doesn't take away from the fact that this team went out and got a 3-2 victory on the road, which, again, winning on the road in MLS is a very difficult thing to do. And we've now done it 3 games in a row. We're on a 5-game winning streak, and we feel great about ourselves. So, yeah, it's still good vibes.
And you forgot the most important part about this victory. Lionel Messi did not have an assist or a goal in this game. So despite that fact, we won 3-2.
Let's not have any spoilers for our awards. And let's instead talk about the substitutes and when they were made. I think we did a pretty good job talking about how we felt about the lineup and the tactical changes and how we would have done things. But we didn't touch too much on the substitutes. In the 71st minute, Kramaski and Rojas come off. Neither has started a game for the team this year, so it's probably not a surprise that they weren't 90 minutes fit. And then Robert Taylor and David Ruiz come on. Make sense? Or would you have liked to see someone other than Ruiz in the midfield?
No, I think that makes complete sense. I did see Ruiz go up further more than I've seen him in the last few games. I think he was involved in a couple of plays there. But both Robert Taylor, Ruiz makes complete sense. I think Kramaski was huffing a little bit by the end of it. So I think he needed a little bit of time off, especially because he hasn't played a full 90 in a while. And then Rojas as well, similarly. So good substitutions at the right time. And then Robert Taylor had, I think, one chance on goal that was ruled offside. He didn't necessarily score that, but he had a good involvement as well. No complaints there from my side on Tata and his substitutions.
Yeah, I think I would have liked it a few minutes earlier just because it did feel like the game was getting into a little bit of a stalemate, and maybe even like Montreal was
shifting in their favor.
A little bit of the momentum. Like I said earlier, I didn't think we were ever really dominating in the second half in a way that made you feel comfortable about the game. And so I would have liked it to be more aggressive, but that is absolutely nitpicking. I agree with you. It's the right moves. About 8 minutes later, 79th minute, Kristoff gets injured. Ryan Sailor comes on. But also, and the more impactful one is Julian Gressel off, Yannick Bright on. Julian Gressel, I don't think has finished a game in quite a while now. And it does feel like this is a 1-for-1 substitute that Tata likes to go to and really changes the game, closes down shop, so to speak, in a way that we both really like. I don't want to talk about Bright too much because we might have an award for him, but do you think that was the right time to say, okay, let's kill it right now?
Yeah, I think so. This team has already come back from behind, scored a third goal. It can sometimes drain a lot out of you, and it's hard to sustain that momentum for so long. The fact that we went behind 2-0 so quickly obviously takes a lot of mental effort to try and get in. So to expect them to be constantly going at it for 90 minutes would have been a little bit harsh. And I'm glad that Yannick Bright was brought in at the time that he did, because he's always a defensive surety in there that really helps stabilize the gaps in the midfield. And again, he had a really good game from my end. I'm sure you'll have an award for him later. Maybe I have one. So we'll discuss that more.
And then lastly, Campana on for Suarez in what was supposed to be the 89th minute. To me, this was just pure defense. Suarez doesn't really give you anything defensively, and Campana is good in the box. They did have a corner. They were going to try and score on a set piece, et cetera, et cetera. Campana does more pressing, more athletic. So to me, when you're trying to kill the game, absolutely makes sense, especially because you weren't really getting forward at that point. So all around good substitutes from my end. Okay, let's get into awards. We give out 6 awards after every game: 1 man of the match, 1 the heron that flew north, and then 4 individual awards, 2 each. And this is just our opportunity to talk about players on an individual basis. So without further ado, this week it is your turn, Saur, to give out the man of the match. Who are you giving it to?
I'm going to give it to the one and only Matías Rojas, who had 1 goal and 1 assist. His goal was game-changing because it shifted the momentum in Inter Miami's favor. Absolute rocket of a left foot. He hammered that into the top right corner, changed the game in our favor. We went on to score that second goal. And then the third goal, he had a fabulous assist for Benjamin Kramaski. We still had a little bit of work to do, but again, 2 goal contributions that had an impact in this game that allowed us to win. And for me, I think that's enough to award him the man of the match for this particular game.
I didn't think he had a tremendous game moment to moment, and yet he had the 2 biggest moments, and it's those moments that win games. So I agree with you. I think he deserves it. Got a nice goal. Beautiful. A tremendous, phenomenal goal.
Nice goal. He says that as though he tapped it in from like 5 feet away. Nice.
It was very
goal.
nice. Again, it was one of those goals where you kind of just like put your hands on your head and you'd be like, I can't believe he just did that. And it worked. It was really nice. And then also the assist for Kramaski, perfectly placed, good vision, just a smart play that I think is on your television. You can see that it's an obvious, easy pass. And yet on the field, it's really hard to have that vision and to be able to put it where you want to put it. And so I want to give him a lot of credit for that. Can we talk about his first half, though? Because he was playing a lot. I know people are saying he was, it was a 4-4-2 or 3-5, whatever. I thought it was a 4-3-3, and he just had the license to move around a lot, and the fullbacks just had the license to pull up. To me, he was the left winger and had the freedom to go into the midfield when he wanted to. But I didn't feel like he was very effective when he did get into the midfield, and then he abdicated that left wing spot a lot so that he didn't create the kind of width we wanted. Let's put the tactics aside. How did you feel about him for the first 40 minutes of the game and what he was doing and how he was trying to make an impact? Because in my opinion, it didn't really come off tremendously like we saw last game.
I sort of agree with you. As I mentioned, I don't know what the formation was. We were at times of 4-4-2, at times of 3-5-2, at times of 4-3-3. I agree with the fact that he had the license to move around. And for me, that was an instructional decision, because while he had the license to move around, Negri was pushing up in his position. So there was definitely some sort of instructions from the coaching staff that was asking Rojas to play slightly centrally because of the impact that he had against the New York Red Bulls. For me, in this game, that didn't work at all. I think he was clogging up the spaces a little bit. Kramaski and him didn't necessarily have the best chemistry, even though they did in the previous game. It just seemed like a little bit all over the place. And I agree with you that, the first half didn't seem to click as well. And I would have preferred him to hold that width, stay on the left side, and allow Gresso and Kramaski to be more central. But for me, I don't think that was something he was trying to do. I think that was a instructional decision. And I don't want to harp on too much about this, but it just seems like the players were doing what they were told to do, because we saw in the second half against New York Red Bulls that when he plays in that left wing channel, he can maintain the width. He was definitely playing as a left winger in that second half against New York Red Bulls. So the fact that he was coming in, so far central, because at certain points he was playing as a central midfielder, as a number 8. So for me, that's not a coincidence. That happened for a reason, and it was instructional. Just didn't work.
And listen, I don't want to criticize him really because this is his first start. He's still getting used to the team, and from what we've seen over his first,
It's his first
120
start.
minutes, yeah,
That's wild.
He's only played 130 minutes or so with this team, and it's been really promising what we've seen so far. So I'm really excited about his future. That left foot is incredible. Yeah, I would have given him an award, my first award, if you hadn't already. So definitely deserved, and a good award, definitely.
I will say his versatility for being able to play in multiple positions is really going to help this team moving forward, especially if we have a few injuries here and there. But yeah, right, your turn.
Okay, our second award is the Heron That Flew North. This is our award for the player that's doing the wrong thing because, herons, Florida herons, they don't fly north for the winter. They don't actually fly anywhere. But anyways, this is, the guy that wasn't doing what they should have been doing. And I was caught between two players on this. And because we just talked about one 10 minutes ago, I'm going to give it to the other. And I know this is a little harsh, very harsh actually, but I'm going to give it to Benjamin Kramaski. He gets the goal, yes. But I felt like he was really laboring through a lot of this game. I don't know if it was just having his fitness ready to go 90. I don't know if he overexerted himself, but he looked like he was laboring a lot, and he was I don't know. I just thought it was a struggle for him today or last night.
Yeah, I told you he was huffing after a point, so he definitely needed to be taken off at some point. The midfield structure in the first half just wasn't there. And I don't want to talk about the structure, but that affected Kramaski as well, because he wasn't able to find the position that he usually does. There were so many times in that game, and I think I tweeted it out as well. I saw him play really deep, more deep than I would ever expect him to be. He was almost playing as a number 6 certain times. And I didn't like that. I think he works a lot better in that number 8, number 10 position, moving from box to box. And I agree with you. He didn't have the best games. He struggled a little bit physically to keep up. Even when he was going to take his goal, it seemed like he was one step behind, and I almost thought he was going to miss it. So I'm a little bit surprised, but not entirely. I think he didn't have the best games, and the structure didn't allow him to succeed. But he was a little bit like a headless chicken there in the midfield sometimes, where he was still trying to figure out how to get involved and play with the other players around him.
Yeah, to me it was more like, I don't know, it was just weird. He looked like from the 6th minute on, he looked like he was struggling. And I noticed it first in the 5th or 6th minute. So I don't know if he's just trying to crank it back in, or I don't really know what it was. His first touch wasn't amazing in this game either. I don't want to harp on him too much. I love Benha. And so the fact that he's back and got a start under his belt in 70 minutes and all of that makes me really happy. And I think he's going to be a big player for us this season. And he's just another guy that you feel comfortable and confident with them on the field. And so, yeah, that's the Heron That Flew North. What is your first award for tonight's episode?
All right. My first award for tonight's episode is How Did I Get Here award.
This goes to, of course, obviously, Sergio Kristoff, because he never thought he was going to start in this game. He just didn't think that Tota Vilas could be so silly as to get an extra yellow card. And he's asking himself, how did I get here?
That's wrong. Not really. Could have worked. I think that was a good imagination from your end, but not the intention that I had for this particular award. I want to give this award to Franco Negri because he found himself high up the pitch way more than I think he was comfortable being. And at certain points, he was playing as a left winger and not as a left back. And I'm pretty sure in the first half, especially, maybe even in the second half a little bit, he was just wondering to himself, how the hell did I get here? And for me, I think that was something that we needed to discuss because Jordi Alba is going to come back very soon. And I'm not sure how much of Franco Negri we're going to keep seeing once Jordi Alba's fit and firing. So I personally like him a lot better when he plays as a traditional solid defender, sits back and defends, and eventually maybe ventures forward, rather than someone who stays really high up and then overlaps and puts those balls in. Obviously, when Alba comes back, I think he's going to do a lot of the attacking output, venturing forward, being in the final third, putting those crosses in. But I'd like to get your thoughts about what you think of Franco Negri, especially in that final third. And do you think that's something that's missing from his game? Or do you like him playing in that particular position in that defensive role rather than higher up the pitch?
I want Franco Negri to play deeper, not because I don't think he has what it takes to get forward. I just think structurally it makes us a better defense when he's sitting back and he can give those two center backs more help in transition. So to me, that's why I want him farther back. I think he's a good player, dude. Listen, he didn't have a great game. He did have maybe a chance to get an assist to Messi and he missed it, but like he's a good MLS left back. And so I don't want to like criticize his talent level because he's a good player. I do think that when Jordi Alba comes back, he's going to be like what we saw from Leo Campana, where he comes on for the last like 6 minutes of games or something like that. But I think he's been a positive defensively over the last month, and maybe more so because he's not so good offensively that he demands the opportunity to go like Jordi Alba does, but he just can sit back and create a more structured defense. And I really like that. So I think we're going to miss him a little bit, at least that aspect of his game, when Jordi Alba comes back. And we're just hoping that Jordi Alba is good for a goal every game to make up for it, because our goal contribution, because, you know, Jordi Alba is world class and he has earned the right to start every game. He's ready to go. But yeah, I don't have any problems with Franco Negri. I'm really happy with him. And every time I think he struggles, I think it's because Tata has put him in a place where it's not the best for the team.
Yeah, and let me caveat this by saying that the award by no means was a criticism of him. I absolutely love Franco Negri, and I agree with you. The reason we've been so defensively solid over the last 6 games is because Franco Negri has been really good defensively. And today, Tata told him to go out and venture forward, and he was wondering to himself, how did I get here? All right, your turn.
Before I go, I just will say there were definitely a couple times where he was sprinting back, trying to get back into the play in transition. And that's when he's wondering, man, why am I responsible for doing this? But yeah, that definitely probably crossed his mind at some point in this game. Anyways, my first award is the Dos Mas Award. 2 more in Spanish.
Yes, thank you. I'm trying to think in terms of who had 2 more. 2 more goals, 2 more assists, 2 more tackles, 2 more. Drake Calendar.
It's none of what you just said.
Damn.
It's 2 more opportunities moving forward to add Canada to the list of places that my recipient has scored a goal. He didn't get a goal in this game, Lionel Messi. He did get an MLS hockey assist, which I do think counts for MLS scorekeeping. So for those that are wondering if his goal contribution streak continues, I think it might by a technicality. Not a real assist by my book, though. But either way, he didn't have his best game. He will have 2 more opportunities this season. We do go on the road to Vancouver in another 2 weeks, and then we will play at Toronto later this season. But I just thought that would be a fun way to introduce a topic on Lionel Messi, who, for the first time since he's come back from injury, or maybe the Monterrey game, wasn't dominant in a way that we've really never seen before.
Yeah, it felt like a lot of our players were a little bit off this time around. When I say off, it just didn't seem to be as fluid or as, it wasn't clicking as well as we were used to seeing it in the last few games. But 31 countries, he scored in 31 different countries. That's
more than that.
Wild.
I think they said on the broadcast this would be his 43rd. So he's got 42. Yeah. It's crazy.
I don't doubt him to add another one to his list. Eventually, it's going to happen. My God, what a phenomenal player, isn't he? And the fact that we can actually rely on him to change games is wonderful. But I'm really happy that this was one game where we were able to show that we don't necessarily need him to contribute in terms of goals and assists to be able to actually get the result that we want. I know that's wishful thinking because he was still on the pitch and definitely involved in a lot of ways and did most of the heavy lifting, but still, this team's come a long way, and we're gonna really miss him when he goes for that international duty.
Yeah, of course we're gonna miss him. I thought he was good. Like I know he
Yeah,
didn't get
100%.
the highlight reel plays that we've become accustomed to over the last couple of weeks, but he still went after guys. He still had some nice dribbles. He still, drew attention in a way that created opportunities for other players. I thought he had a good game, solid game, not man of the match type performance. Like again, like that's what we've become accustomed to. But I still thought he was solid. And I think, like you said, it's really good to know that we can, again, go on the road and get the result we expected, even when he's not phenomenal. And so, yeah, I thought it was worth talking about.
And what is it to say about a player who sets such high levels that when he has a 9 out of 10 performance, we're like, oh, I mean, yeah, he wasn't amazing. So for me, he just keeps surprising me, man. He's a phenomenal player.
Okay, let's hear your second award.
I'm a bit confused. I've got two more that I'd planned out, but we've already talked about one player. So I'm going to go for my third one that I'd set up. It's the Poor Parenting Award.
Poor Parenting Award. This is going to go to Leo Campana for not not yelling at Luis Suarez to get off faster and not parenting well enough.
Well, I'll give you the points for being creative and imaginative about it, but once again, you failed at your task, my friend. This award goes to Julian Gressel because he has been the subject of poor parenting, and his parent is obviously Tata Martino. I think we've hammered Julian Gressel a lot over the last few games. I think over the last 6-7 games, we've constantly mentioned about how he needs to rest, he needs to be subbed, he needs to be benched. All of that still holds true. But this game was the perfect personification of why Julian Gressel is suffering. And I think that's because Tata Martino doesn't have a plan for him. But because Julian Gressel is his child, someone that he brought in from his time in Atlanta, he just wants to constantly play him. And it's not doing Julian Gressel any favors. For me, I thought he had a decent game. He wasn't phenomenal, but he's also been asked to play 3 different positions within the span of 90 minutes, and that's not helpful for any player to find their actual role on this team. So I thought this was definitely something that we needed to talk about, or at least highlight.
Yeah, it's the same conversation with Gressel every week. I didn't think this performance is any different than what we've seen over the last couple of weeks, and so I don't really have.
I will
anything new to
say
add.
this one made me sympathize for him a lot more than the previous performances because I think this one I was blaming Tata more than I was blaming Gressel. In the last few games, I thought it was the quality of the player, and maybe it still is. But at this point, I think he's probably being asked to do a lot more, or is not being utilized in the best possible manner that optimizes his talent. And for me, that really, is a issue. That's the main issue with Gressel. He's a good player and he'd fit in any other MLS team.
I want to say this on Julian Gressel's behalf. We are 13 games into the MLS season. We made it to the quarterfinals of the CONCACAF Champions Cup. And this player is a locked-in starter. Couldn't be more locked in. Has started every single game. For a team that is number 1 in the MLS, the most dominant team so far. It's not just fluky. They have been that dominant. He's a locked-in starter for one of the highest scoring teams in MLS, on track to be the highest scoring team in MLS history. And our complaints are that he's, not some of the guys that we have on the bench. And so, again, let's just remind ourselves that we're spoiled. Julian Gressel is a solid, good MLS veteran, and he hasn't shined in the way that he has in the past, and he hasn't shined in the way that maybe we would have wanted when we signed him, and he hasn't shined in the way that we think he's capable of, and he hasn't shined in the way that maybe Diego Gomez and Federico Redondo have and Kramaski did last year. And so maybe we're a little frustrated that he continues to start over some of these guys. That said, he is a locked-in starter for one of the best teams in MLS history. So, he's doing fine. He's doing okay. Could he be better? Yes, but I don't want to complain too much when the resume is actually pretty good.
All right, bring it home. Last award.
Okay, our last award for the night is fittingly, it's the After Party Award.
Is it for Luis Suarez because he went on a bender after yesterday's game in Canada and had himself a little bit of a night out in Montreal?
No, the After Party Award, for much more obvious reasons than whatever nonsense you just spilled, goes to Yannick Bright.
So mine is nonsense, yours is creativity. You see how I guess how this is how it works, right?
Yannick Bright, when he comes on, you can lock it down and get ready for the after party, because his job is to come on when you have a lead and just make you feel better about holding on to that lead. And he does. He comes on and he knows where to be. He knows where to position himself. He gets interceptions, and he just makes me feel more comfortable about our defense. It is something of a signal to the rest of the team that, hey, we're trying to lock it down now. So I don't want to give him all the credit, but for a young player to have this type of calming influence makes me really happy. Makes me feel like, okay, this game's over. Let's get ready for the after party.
Yeah, I've always found myself wondering if Yannick Bright should be starting for this team. And then I think about it. He's a rookie who plays 20 minutes for this Inter Miami team that is absolutely stacked. For him to even be trusted with that role is absolutely phenomenal, and he has an amazing future ahead of him. He's really carved this role out for himself, man. I think this is really, really something that he excels at, and he's been doing it better and better every single game. We just look a lot more solid defensively once he comes on. Obviously, we're gonna have one game where he's not gonna be the one who's brought on because we need attacking substitutions. But I'm going to be so excited for his next season when he warrants a bit more time on the pitch. And yeah, he's got phenomenal talent.
He reminds me, and I know this is lofty praise that is, over the top, but he reminds me of Darlington Nagbe, who is one of the best sixes in, MLS history, long time professional, currently with the Columbus Crew. And the way that he's just always in the right place, has the athleticism to make an impact, is, listen, Nagbe is a better player than Bright, but you can see how Bright could get there one day, and it really makes me happy. He's absolutely the type of player that you can build a structure around. And you just mentioned, you're absolutely right. We have so many quality, proven midfield options on this team, and yet I would love to see Yannick Bright get a start and see what it looks like, because I feel like that might be our next clean sheet, honestly.
Because this is not about Yannick Bright being brought on just to give youth some minutes. Right. Lawson Sunderland is technically ahead of Yannick Bright in the pecking order. Tata trusts Yannick Bright to do a specific job when he comes on that Yannick Bright has been doing. So the fact that he has that trust of the coaching staff speaks volumes. And I don't want to be the one to start the hype train behind Yannick Bright, but if any one of the listeners or anyone in the chat wants to do that, I'll definitely get on.
I think you actually had a really interesting point right there, where he doesn't come on to develop and get minutes. He comes on to impact the game. And I think that might be as high of praise as you can give, because listen, Diego Gomez was starting earlier this season to develop and improve as a player. And listen, he brought it, and now he's he is what he is. And the same thing with David Ruiz, and the same thing with Benjamin Kramaski, and the same thing with Noah Allen. And to a lesser extent, the same thing with Campana and Schneider Borgelin and all of those things. Yannick Bright comes on to impact the game, and that's the only time he's come on, right? I don't think he's come on a single time just because we have a 4-goal lead and let's just go play him, right? He comes on because we have a 1-goal lead, or maybe 2 goals, and we're trying to kill the game, and he's done it really well.
100%.
I kind of want to know if we've even given up a goal, once he's been on the field. Just off the top of my head, the New York Red Bulls penalty is the only goal that we've given up, and that speaks for itself because that's the time of the game where the other team is really going for it.
Yeah, and that's why I was a little bit annoyed at this specific game as well, because we really thought that we turned a corner with our defense and the kind of defensive transitions that we'd conceded previously. I thought we were getting away from that. But this just seemed like we'd gone back to that first couple of weeks where we really saw us struggle in those defensive transitions. But hey, I'm glad Tata learned from it. We got the 3 points. We got the victory away from home. And now it's time for Orlando, baby.
We talked about just kind of running through the rest of the team just to see if anyone else needs to be talked about. We talked about Kristoff and Cello a little bit before when we were talking about their dynamic. But Nico Freire, Drake Callender, Luis Suarez. I actually do have a point about Suarez, but anything on any of those guys that you wanted to bring in?
I think Callender had an okay game. That goal, obviously, maybe he could have saved it, but I don't want to be too critical of him. I thought he had a couple of really good saves in the first half and the second half that could potentially have given him some issues. Nico Freire, I think, had a okay game as well. The defensive unit we can discuss potentially in the same breath, right? Because they all struggled in a similar manner. So nothing from me there, but I'd love to hear your thoughts about Luis Suarez.
Yeah, I actually had an award for Drake Callender just in case we got to it, because he did have a really nice save on Chouanier in the 28th minute, and I thought that maybe that can be a stepping stone for him to, get some confidence and sort of take that moving forward. The Luis Suarez goal, very nuanced thing, but he kicks it with his left foot instead of his right foot, even though you might think that would be the more natural way to get around Lassiter to get there. He uses his left foot, and by doing that, he gets his hip in between Lassiter and the ball, which prevents Lassiter from getting a foot up to deflect it. And that is like the little technical detail, and to be able to do that subconsciously and just as an instinct is just so refined and so beautiful. And it's the little things like that that make a player, as great as Luis Suarez. And I didn't want to go without mentioning it, because if you pay attention, it's the little things that really make all the difference.
And I'm pretty sure that would have been intentional. If it were any other player, I would have maybe said, "Oh, it wasn't. It was a fluke." But this was. He's got some weird body agility. Like the way he positions his body and the way he takes certain shots makes no sense to me as a regular human being. But then again, Luis Suarez is not a regular human being. So the fact that he keeps chugging along and getting goals and getting involved in the games is more than enough for me.
Yeah, he's a dancer, not a runner, for sure. Okay, here's the Supporter Shield table. As you guys can see, Inter Miami, 27 points, top of the table. There was a game today that I don't think this takes into account, but I don't think it changes anything at the top. Cincinnati got a nice win at Columbus. You got to give them credit for that, and they are keeping pace, but it does look like there's a nice little gap opening between Inter Miami and everyone else that they're competing with. The Red Bulls now 7 points, Toronto 8 points, Columbus not even on that list. And also not Orlando City, who we play in the midweek. Any thoughts on where this team is in the standings and how you feel about them moving forward?
I feel really good, man. I'm not sure if the Supporters Shield was something that we really aim for in the long run. We obviously want to go for the MLS Cup, but the fact that we've gone on this really good run of 5 games unbeaten, or more than that, but 5 winning games, and then we've accumulated these points, scoring so many goals. It's a great feeling to have. Cincinnati's obviously keeping pace with us. They're a good team for sure, but I see us definitely be locked in for that top 3 if the season continues this way.
It feels like in the East, it's really just going to be us and Cincinnati. Granted, the whole season's going to change at Copa America and when the guys leave. So it's too early to say for sure, but it does feel like we're getting a little bit of separation. I really like to see that. Before we go, anything about this Orlando City game? Tata mentioned in the post-game show or post-game, press conference that there wasn't going to be any rotation needed for that game. It's the rivalry game on the road, 5 wins in a row, 3 on the road in a row. Orlando City did get a win this weekend, but they haven't been in great form. Any top-line thoughts before we head out?
We dispatched them 5-0 last time. Let's make it 7-2 this time.
I think I'm a little more pessimistic than a lot of Inter Miami fans are right now. Listen, they are the rival. They are the rival. We have Inter Miami's never won at their stadium, and so I don't want to take anything for granted.
I'll be happy with the draw, actually. It's a midweek game. It's away from home against our rivals. I wouldn't be too concerned about a draw.
Do you think we're going to get what are your expectations for the lineup, just off the top of your head?
I think we're going to get Aviles back, obviously. No, I don't think there's going to be any big changes. We'll have to see if we have Kramaski starting, because I think maybe Tata sees from the previous game that he's a little bit unfit. So give him a rest because it's a midweek game. So Rojas in the middle, Robert Taylor on the left side. We'll see. I think there'll be a couple of changes here and there. Maybe, Ruiz comes back into the lineup, but not any major changes as such. Gressel's definitely going to play.
Gressel's definitely going to play. I'll be interested to see what he does on the left wing, right? Rojas deserves to start after putting in a man of the match performance, and yet Robert Taylor's also one of your best players, and some people even think he's the third best player on the team. And so I'll be interested to see what he does with that dynamic. Anything else before we head out?
No, man, it's been a good few weeks of being an Inter Miami fan, and we just need to enjoy it as much as we can. We were a little bit critical about certain tactics and stuff, but at the end of the day, what matters the most is the 3 points away from home and the fact that Inter Miami finishes the week on top of the supporter shield standings. That's what matters.
Yeah, and we nitpick because we're diehards and we want to see us be perfect at everything, but ultimately this is a team in tremendous form. Inter Miami fans who have been around for the whole time know this is one of the best runs we've ever had. Top 3 runs without a doubt. And hopefully we can make it the best run by keeping it going a little bit longer. Guys, we'll be back for the pregame show on YouTube in the hour before kickoff. It's a lot of fun. Come join us. As soon as the lineup comes out, we're live to talk about it, to talk about the other team, to talk about our expectations, give predictions, get into the chat. It's a lot of fun. Other than that, it was a lot of fun, guys, and we will see you guys next time. Have a great night.